You call their name and nothing happens. You say it again. Maybe the third time they look up, but not really. Their eyes come off the screen for 2 seconds, their mouth moves, and then they're gone again, somewhere behind whatever's playing. You're standing in your own living room feeling like a stranger in it. And there's a part of this you haven't said out loud yet. It's not just that you feel ignored. It's that you feel replaced. This video is about what's actually happening in the brain during that scene, not the version with the alarming statistics, not the 5 steps you've already tried. The mechanism, the thing underneath the behavior, translated into exactly what you've been watching at home. Because once you can see it clearly, the story you've been telling yourself about it starts to change. There's something worth understanding about the brain before screens enter the picture. The brain, every brain, at every age, runs on a reward system. It's ancient. It evolved to push us toward things that matter. Food, safety, connection, novelty. When you find something valuable, the brain releases a signal that says, "Do that again." That signal is dopamine. And in a child's brain, that system is particularly sensitive. It's supposed to be. A child's job developmentally is to be curious, to reach toward new things, to explore, to connect. The reward system is what makes that feel good. It's what made your child, at 4 or 5, completely absorbed in a puddle, genuinely fascinated by a caterpillar, able to spend 40 minutes building something out of couch cushions. Now here's the part that matters. Screens didn't invent the reward system. They found it, and they were engineered with considerable precision to activate it continuously. Every notification, every autoplay, every like, every level, every perfectly timed reward. They're not accidents. They're the output of teams of engineers whose specific job was to make the brain's reward signal fire as often and as reliably as possible. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's product design. And a child's developing brain, precisely because it's wired to chase novelty and reward, is the most susceptible audience that system has ever encountered. That's the starting point. Not your child's character, not your parenting choices, a system that was designed to be extremely good at doing exactly what it does. Here's what the research on the developing brain actually tells us. And here's what it looks like from inside your house. In the first minutes on a device, the brain's reward system activates. Dopamine releases. The child feels alert, engaged, lit up. This is real. It's not imaginary. The screen is genuinely stimulating in the way that the brain registers as important. But then something happens that most conversations about this skip past. The brain is not a passive receiver. It adapts. When any stimulus fires the reward system repeatedly at high intensity without pause, the brain begins to compensate. It dials down its sensitivity. It produces fewer receptors. It raises the threshold for what counts as rewarding. This is called tolerance. And it's not a moral failure. It's the brain doing exactly what brains do, trying to maintain equilibrium in the face of something that's overwhelming the system. What this means in practical terms, inside 4 hours of daily use, is this. The brain that began the session firing enthusiastically at moderate stimulation ends the session requiring much more stimulation to feel anything at all. And then the device goes away, and the child has to re-enter a world that, compared to what just happened, feels almost completely flat. The homework, the dinner table, the conversation you're trying to have, the book, the yard. None of it is firing the system the way the screen just did. None of it is designed to. The real world was never engineered to compete with software built specifically to dominate the reward pathway. This is not your child choosing screens over connection. This is what it looks like from inside a brain that has spent 4 hours in a highly stimulated state and is now being asked to function in the ordinary world. This is what it looks like from inside the brain. The boredom is an attitude. The flatness isn't ingratitude. The inability to transition isn't defiance. It's a neurological state, one that was produced by the session, and one that takes real time to reverse. You already know the research says screens affect attention. You already know the recommendation is under 2 hours a day. What nobody explains is why it's so hard, not just for your child to stop, but for you to hold the line when they can't. Here's the mechanism. When the device comes away, dopamine drops. Not gradually, abruptly. The brain was in an elevated state, and now the input is gone. What follows? The irritability, the desperation, the collapse, the meltdown that seems wildly disproportionate to the situation. is not theater. It is a real neurological response to a real biochemical shift. Studies on the reward system consistently show that repeated high stimulation exposure followed by abrupt removal produces a withdrawal response. The pattern showing up in the developmental research resembles, in its structure, not its severity, the response to other substances that hijack the dopamine pathway. The brain learned to expect a certain level of input. When it doesn't arrive, it protests. And here's the part that explains the loop you're in. When your child protests, when the meltdown escalates past what you were prepared to hold, and you give the device back, the protest stops. The brain gets what it was signaling for. The signal worked. The brain has now learned something. Protest long enough and intensely enough, and the input returns. That's not manipulation. That's learning. The brain does not care about your limit. It cares about the pattern. And on your side of the equation, in your exhaustion, in your overwhelm, in the part of you that could not sustain one more minute of the escalation, you were also responding to a real signal. The relief of giving it back was real. The peace that followed was real. And your brain also learned something. This is the exit. This is what it looks like from inside the system both of you are caught in. This is not a discipline problem. This is a design problem. The screen was engineered to produce this loop. The meltdown is the mechanism working exactly as intended. Not by your child, not against you, but as the inevitable output of a reward system that has been trained to expect a level of stimulation the real world cannot casually provide. This is not a verdict on your child. This is not a verdict on you. It is, finally, an accurate description of what you've been living inside. And here is the thing that changes when you can see it clearly. The brain that learned this pattern, learned it. It was not born this way. It was trained. And what was trained can, slowly, and with real support, be retrained. The reward system is not broken. It adapted. And adaptation runs in both directions. For anyone who just absorbed this and immediately thought, I need to be able to say this to my child, but I don't know how to say it without it becoming a fight, there's a guide in the description built exactly for that moment. It's called the Brain Explanation. It includes specific language for talking to children ages 6 through 16 about what screens are actually doing, scripts for the conversation, not just the concept. The link is in the description and the pinned comment, whenever you're ready for it. Understanding the mechanism doesn't flip a switch. It doesn't make the next meltdown disappear. What it does, and this is not a small thing, is change what you're looking at when you're in it. There are 3 specific things that become legible through this lens, not as tactics, as new information about what you're actually observing. The first one, the flatness after the device comes away, is not attitude. It is a state of neurological understimulation that typically takes 30 to 60 minutes to begin lifting on its own. That's not a guess. That's what the research on the reward system consistently shows. When you know that, you stop taking the flatness personally. And when you stop taking it personally, you stop responding to it in ways that escalate the distance. The second thing, the meltdown intensity is not proportional to the situation. It's proportional to the drop. The bigger the session, the higher the dopamine was elevated, the steeper the fall when the input stops. A 4-hour session followed by abrupt removal produces a different response than a 40-minute session followed by a 5-minute warning. Not because your child has better self-control on a shorter day. Because the neurological drop is smaller. That's actionable. That's something you can actually work with. The third thing, and this is the one that tends to land hardest, the boredom your child expresses after the screen goes away is real. It is not an exaggeration. The real world genuinely feels less stimulating to a brain that has just spent hours in a high dopamine state. Knowing that doesn't mean you return the device. It means you stop asking why they can't just go find something to do. Because the honest answer is that the reward system is temporarily below the threshold for finding ordinary things rewarding. Give it time. Stay nearby. Don't fill the silence with another screen. Let the system recalibrate. This is not a protocol. It's a way of seeing what's already there. One thing, not everything. Start with understanding what you're looking at. The rest begins to follow. If this opens something you want to take further, specifically the question of how to bring this conversation to your child without it turning into a fight, the brain explanation in the description is where that goes next. Scripts, language, and a framework built for children from 6 to 16. Link in the description and the pinned comment. When did you first notice that your child seemed genuinely unreachable after screen time? Not just distracted, but somewhere else entirely. And what did you tell yourself about it in that moment? Here is what you came in with. A behavior that felt like a choice. A child who seemed to be choosing something over you. A loop you kept finding yourself inside. The limit, the meltdown, the capitulation, the shame, with no clear explanation for why it kept repeating. Here is what you're leaving with. A mechanism, not an excuse. A mechanism. The reward system was activated at a level the everyday world was never designed to match. The brain adapted to that level. When the input stopped, the brain protested, because that's what trained systems do. And you responded to the protest the way an exhausted person responds to something that feels unendurable. You found the exit. That's not a character failure. That's what it looks like when the design is working exactly as intended on both of you. The research on the developing brain tells us something that doesn't make the headlines as often as the warnings do. Neuroplasticity runs in both directions. The same capacity for adaptation that allowed the reward system to become calibrated to high stimulation is the same capacity that allows it, gradually, with real time and real consistency, to recalibrate toward the ordinary world. The brain is not broken. It learned. And what learned can relearn. That's not a promise that next Tuesday will go smoothly. It's a description of how the system actually works and a direction. What you came in carrying was a moral verdict. What that verdict was doing was making the problem about character, yours or your child's, when the problem was always about design. And a design problem has a different kind of answer than a character problem does. Not a simpler answer, but a real one. You already knew something was wrong. Now you know what to call it. Now you know what you've been watching. That's not the whole path, but it is the difference between standing in the dark and having something solid to hold. That's where everything else starts. The child who is still there, they're waiting for exactly the parent who watched this video. Keep going.